I am a 21-year-old living with my parents and my elder sister. Our house is located a few miles away from the central city, so there is much less crowd. The house is located close to a railway track. Many trains go past that area, but gradually the frequency of the trains lowers as the night approaches. People are out during the day and are usually back from work just after sunset, so during the night you will rarely see someone out. I am one of those few who have to come back from work after sunset. My job requires me to stay with my clients until they leave the company premises. To give you an idea, to reach home, one has to cross the railway line, and it's not one of those bridges which you could climb up the stairs and walk across. It is a narrow road at the same level as the railway line, with manual barriers to prevent the vehicles from crossing when the train is coming. It was one of those nights when I was returning home after a busy day. It was nearly dark, and after an hour of riding my bike, I reached home. There was something wrong about the crossing, but I never had any weird experience at that place. But that particular night was different. Late in the evening, my mom asked me to get some things from the store, which she needed to make dinner that night. So I took my bike keys, grabbed my wallet, and headed towards the store. I reached the store, put all the things on the list, loaded it on my bike, and turned towards home. I was riding slow and taking the light breeze on my face, and after 10 minutes I was at that crossing again. It was dark, and the intersection was poorly lit as usual. And just when I was in the middle of the railway crossing, I heard a faint noise from behind saying my name. It was not human voice. It was faint and had an echo to it. Chills went down my spine, and somehow I knew I shouldn't look back. But I slowed down even further, and that voice repeated itself, speaking my name once again. This time I got freaked out, and was sure it was not human calling me. I just throttled and made my bike rev, and in seconds I was in front of my house. I never looked back the whole time. I didn't share the experience with any of my family members, but now I always make sure to head out with someone if the situation arises to go to that area after dark.
A distant relative of mine has suddenly passed away. I never met the woman. She had a 4-year-old daughter named Lisa. Her father had abandoned the family when Lisa was born, so my aunt took care of Lisa. The little girl never wanted to be left alone, always by my aunt's side. It had become problematic. My aunt couldn't go anywhere without Lisa, and even her own daughter started to get jealous. One day, my aunt told me that she had to leave town for a week and asked if I could babysit Lisa for her. I agreed. I lived alone and could do with some company. Lisa's behavior was strange. She had a teddy bear always tucked tightly under her arm, and she never let go of it. She did not join other kids in town to play. She never spoke. She never smiled. She only ever stared at the wall. Something was not right. I just bought a new camera and figured giving her my old one to make her happy. When she saw the camera, her eyes brightened up and there was a smile on her face. She went around my house to take pictures of everything. In our first evening together, I discovered how difficult it was to deal with Lisa. Whenever I tried to leave her, she started crying and screaming my name. She even forced her way into the bathroom with me, which was very embarrassing. At bedtime, she refused to stay in the spare room and insisted sleeping with me. I read her a bedtime story, and after a while, Lisa was fast asleep. That was when I noticed her teddy bear. One of its legs was missing. The other was charred, as if it had been burned. It was not pleasing to see. In the middle of the night, I was awoken by a strange noise. I noticed that Lisa was wide awake, trembling and shaking. Tears were streaming down her cheeks as Lisa quietly wept. I held her hand and realized that it was very cold. I asked her what was wrong. "She's looking at me again," mumbled Lisa. "Who is?" I prompted. Lisa never uttered another word. When I tried to tell her it was all imagination and that she needed to sleep, she kept shaking her head and whimpering. It took me a long time to put her back to sleep. The next day, Lisa was fine again. She loved playing with the camera. When it was time for her to return home, I told her that she could keep my camera. Although she never spoke, she smiled and hugged me tightly. I could feel her joy. I dropped Lisa off at my aunt's house and stayed for a cup of tea. She thanked me for taking care of Lisa and chatted about her. "Poor girl," said my aunt. She had not said a single word since her mother passed away. I could not contain my curiosity and asked how Lisa's mum died. My aunt's expression suddenly changed. She died in a fire. Oh dear, how did it start? I asked. Well, my aunt hesitated. I could tell she was unwilling to talk about it. It's a sad story. Lisa's mother was very troubled and committed suicide. She poured gasoline around the apartment and lit a match. She burned herself alive, along with her property. I'm very sorry, I said. That was horrible. Yes, said my aunt. Her immediate family was so shocked that they kept a low profile and pretended it was an accident. My aunt continued. There was a small funeral, but only a few close relatives attended. Lisa was kept away from the funeral. She still thinks that her mother was on a long business trip. We are still not prepared to tell her the truth. A few days had passed. Lisa died. My aunt had to go to the toilet in the middle of the night and left Lisa sleeping in their room. When she returned, Lisa was not breathing. She was found lying motionless in her bed. Nobody could understand what happened. The coroner could not determine the cause of her death. She was healthy, and her body had no marks. She had just mysteriously died. At the funeral, I went back to my aunt's house. Everybody was very emotional. She returned the camera I had given to Lisa. It was something to remember her by. At the night of Lisa's funeral, I looked through the pictures in the camera. It was full of random photos Lisa had taken. There were pictures of my apartment, my aunt's house, children in her neighborhood, dogs, toys, and candy. Silly pictures that a child would take. The last picture would not load on the camera, but occupied much more memory than other pictures. I took the memory card and inserted it into my computer to view it. It made my blood run cold. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run outside, but it was already late into the night. The timestamp on the photo would show that the picture had supposedly been taken on the same night Lisa had died. It was a picture of her sleeping with me in my room, with a charred woman watching by.